What 20 years in the corporate world really taught me. I still remember my first day in the corporate world like it was burned into my memory. The smell of fresh paint and industrial carpet cleaner, the nervous tightening of my tie, the way my shoes felt just a little too stiff as I walked into the glass building that I believed would define my future. I was young, ambitious, hungry for success, and deeply convinced that if I worked hard enough, followed the rules, and stayed loyal, the system would reward me fairly. 20 years later, I understand how naive that belief was, but I don't regret it. The corporate world didn't just teach me how to earn a living, it taught me how power works, how people behave when incentives change, and how easily you can lose yourself if you're not careful. In those early years, everything felt like a competition disguised as collaboration. Meetings were filled with smiles that didn't reach people's eyes, handshakes that measured dominance, and compliments that sometimes felt like weapons. I learned very quickly that competence alone was not enough. You could be the smartest person in the room, the hardest worker on the floor, and still be invisible if you didn't know how to position yourself. Performance mattered, yes, but perception mattered more. I watched people who spoke confidently but said very little rise faster than those who quietly delivered results. That was my first real lesson. Corporate success is as much about storytelling as it is about skill. As the years passed, I became fluent in the unspoken language of offices. I learned when to speak and when silence was safer. I learned that emails could be political documents, that CCs were power moves, and that meetings were often less about decisions and more about control. I learned that the phrase, "let's circle back," usually meant, "this will never happen," and that, "we're a family here," often translated to, "we expect sacrifices without guarantees." These weren't things taught in business schools or onboarding sessions. They were absorbed slowly, sometimes painfully, through observation and mistakes. One of the hardest lessons came early. Loyalty is rarely rewarded the way you expect. I stayed late nights, missed family events, answered calls on vacations, and told myself it would all pay off. I believed that dedication would be remembered. What I discovered instead was that organizations have short memories and even shorter emotional attachments. When budgets tighten or leadership changes, loyalty becomes a line item, not a virtue. I watched brilliant, committed people escorted out with cardboard boxes after decades of service, their sacrifices reduced to a brief farewell email. That changed something in me. I stopped believing that a company would ever love me back the way I loved my work. Climbing the ladder brought its own revelations. Promotions didn't just come with more money or responsibility, they came with isolation. The higher I went, the lonelier it became. Conversations became more guarded. Trust became transactional. I realized that leadership often meant carrying the emotional weight of decisions you couldn't fully explain to your team. I had to lay off people I respected, defend strategies I privately doubted, and smile through meetings where outcomes were predetermined. Power, I learned, isn't freedom. It's constraint wrapped in authority. The corporate world also taught me how burnout doesn't arrive dramatically. It doesn't announce itself with alarms or breakdowns. It creeps in quietly, disguised as productivity. One day you realize you're exhausted all the time, cynical about work you once loved, and strangely numb to achievements that should make you proud. I chased titles, bonuses, and recognition, only to discover that the satisfaction they brought was temporary and shallow. Each milestone raised the bar but lowered the joy. That was another painful truth. External validation is a hunger that never stays fed. People often talk about work-life balance as if it's something you achieve once and then keep forever. That's a lie. Balance is negotiated daily, and most of us lose that negotiation more often than we win. I missed birthdays, anniversaries, and quiet evenings that I'll never get back. I justified it by telling myself I was building security, creating opportunities, being responsible. But time has a way of exposing the real cost of those choices. Success feels different when you realize it was paid for with moments that can't be replaced. Yet, despite all of this, the corporate world wasn't only ruthless. It was also an incredible teacher. It taught me discipline, structure, and resilience. It taught me how to work with people who think differently, how to manage conflict without emotion, and how to stay calm under pressure. I learned how to break massive problems into manageable pieces, how to communicate clearly, and how to deliver even when motivation was gone. These skills didn't just help my career, they shaped my character. I also learned that most people are not villains or heroes. They're just responding to incentives. Good people make bad decisions when systems reward the wrong behavior. Managers pressure teams not because they're cruel, but because they're pressured themselves. Understanding this helped me replace anger with clarity. It taught me to stop personalizing structural problems. The system wasn't designed to care about individuals, it was designed to optimize outcomes. Once I accepted that, I stopped expecting fairness and started focusing on agency. One of the most valuable lessons took nearly 2 decades to fully sink in: your job is not your identity. For years, I introduced myself by my title. My sense of worth rose and fell with performance reviews and quarterly results. When things went well, I felt invincible. When they didn't, I felt hollow. It took a long time, and a few personal crises, to understand how dangerous that mindset was. A role can be taken away. A company can disappear. If your identity is tied too tightly to either, the fall is devastating. I learned that saying no is a skill, not a failure. Early in my career, I said yes to everything because I thought it made me valuable. All it really did was make me tired. Over time, I realized that boundaries are not career limiting, they're career defining. The people who last aren't the ones who burn brightest, they're the ones who know when to step back, protect their energy, and choose their battles wisely. Perhaps the most surprising lesson was about money. For years, I chased higher salaries believing they would solve my problems. And while money absolutely reduces stress and increases options, it doesn't create meaning. Past a certain point, more income stopped changing my life in any significant way. What mattered more was autonomy, respect, and alignment with my values. The corporate world rarely talks about this because it's hard to monetize contentment. As I approached the 20-year mark, my perspective shifted. I stopped obsessing over promotions and started investing in skills that belong to me, not my employer. I built relationships outside my company. I protected my health more fiercely. I stopped pretending that work was my passion and started letting it simply be work. Ironically, that's when my performance improved. Detachment made me clearer, calmer, and more effective. Looking back, the corporate world didn't betray me. It simply revealed itself. It showed me that systems don't love you, that success is often ambiguous, and that fulfillment has to be built intentionally, not outsourced to a job title. It taught me how to survive, how to adapt, and ultimately, how to choose myself without burning bridges. If I could speak to my younger self walking into that glass building, I wouldn't tell them to quit or rebel. I would tell them to learn, but not to believe everything. To work hard, but not to disappear. To care, but not blindly. And most importantly, to remember that a career is just one chapter of a life, not the whole story. 20 years in the corporate world didn't give me all the answers. But it gave me clarity. And sometimes, clarity is the most valuable promotion you'll ever receive. They told me if I worked hard, stayed loyal, and played by the rules, success would take care of itself. 20 years later, I finally understand what the corporate world really rewards, and what it quietly takes from you in return. If you've ever felt stuck, burned out, or secretly wondered if this is all there is, this story is for you. Subscribe now, because what I learned the hard way might save you years of regret. If this story resonated with you, don't keep it to yourself. Share it with someone who's grinding silently, questioning their path, or standing at the edge of burnout. Like this, comment with your own experience, and subscribe for more raw, honest stories that tell the truth no one in corporate meetings ever will. Your time, your energy, and your life are worth more than a title, don't forget that.